Good morning, everyone. I'm just checking to be sure everyone's audio has been connected. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We have our colleagues from School Finance as well as our team from the Office of Federal Programs joining us. Just kind of a couple housekeeping items. We do have a lot of material to share, and this Maintenance of Equity technical assistance training is also being recorded so that we can use it as a resource on our website and as a tool for future use should we need some additional support with our districts. So welcome to our Maintenance of Equity office hour. And we called it an office hour, but really it is more of a technical training related to maintenance of equity. So thank you so much, folks, for joining us. My name is Shelley Shassi-Jandro. I am the director of the Office of Federal Emergency Relief Programs. So as you know, this requirement of maintenance of equity came about in one of our federal emergency relief packages, which is why we are here today and joined by our colleagues in School Finance. I'll let the rest of the team introduce themselves.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Monique Sullivan, and I am the ARP coordinator.
I'm Karen Kuziak. I coordinate the CARES and CARISA or ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 funds.
I'm Ida Batista. I'm school finance coordinator. Paula Gravel, who's the director of finance, is not joining us today, but if there are questions that need to be relayed back, I will take those for her.
I am Karan Sharma, and I'm a business analyst, work closely with finance team as well as data team and feds team. So good morning.
So we are all here together to support you folks. So we really want to make this as interactive as possible. And you'll see that we walk through a number of items. Some of this information may not be new to you, but we just want to be sure that we've shared it, that everybody has a common understanding. So as we talked about, maintenance of equity is a new set of fiscal and staffing equity requirements, and they came about in ARP, the American Rescue Plan. And essentially that is the last emergency funding package that we received in March of 2021. So really thinking about the fact that we had already been in the pandemic for approximately a year. If you all recall, March 13th of 2020 was the last day most of our kiddos were in a face-to-face setting. And then we just started being able to engage in different types of educational strategies. But essentially what this requirement is doing is having the SEA, so the Maine Department of Education, as well as our local education agencies. And we use LEA in this slideshow because it is really related to the statute, and federal language still uses LEA. So where you see LEA, we're gonna sort of refer to school districts or SAUs in that token. So as the department, we were required to maintain fiscal equity, and the school district is also required to maintain fiscal equity. And you will see as we sort of talk, there's two components. There's a fiscal and a staffing equity, and it's really comparing years sort of after the pandemic to years prior to the pandemic, as well as to the year that the pandemic transpired. So thinking about comparing FY22 to FY19 and also to FY21. So these are just things that we're working through. What we did try to do is we tried to denote where this information can be found in the FAQ. So you will notice that most of the slides by the slide number at the bottom denotes what question in the FAQ. And as soon as I'm no longer talking and I'm just driving the slides, I'll go ahead and put that FAQ link right in the chat box so that you have it. Also, our team is monitoring the chat box. So if you happen to have a heat of the moment type of question, go ahead and put it in the chat box. We'll be sure to capture it at the end and address any questions. So again, maintenance of equity is new, not to be confused with maintenance of effort, which is something that you folks are probably familiar with if you've received ESEA federal programs, ESEA federal program funding in the past. So title program, two different items, right? ESEA versus ESSER, ESSER. However, same concept for maintenance of effort. So maintenance of effort is really related to the state being sure that we're funding schools at an equivalent level. So again, effort is state-based, equity is related to both a state entity as well as a local entity. So in the IFR for a maintenance of equity under ARP, there was a requirement for some information to be publicly available. And essentially this requirement, as we've bolded on this slide, is to promote accountability and transparency. So by the beginning of July, or July 8th, the SEA, the Maine Department of Education, was required to post information on our website. So if you have not visited our website in some time, you will see the pictures on the bottom kind of denote what we have as information on our website per the statute and the requirement. So we have a tile right on our homepage that's maintenance of equity. And once you start drilling down into that page, you can see that we have a list of non-exempt SAUs. We'll go over those exemptions in a moment. So there are some components in our makeup of our schools that allows a school to say that they're exempt from maintaining equity, and we will talk about those. And once you drill down, there's a link towards the end of the maintenance of equity data page, and you can see which district needs to maintain equity, which districts were exempt for whatever reason that they were exempt for. And then once you drill down into a second tab within that workbook, you see that larger picture, which is the bottom right-hand side of your screen. And that picture is of the districts who need to maintain equity, what schools, because again, it's twofold once we get into the nitty-gritty of what maintenance of equity is, which schools within that district must maintain equity. So the additional requirement that we are working on collectively as a team, which is really important that we've pulled this interdepartmental team together. So we have folks, Karan represents our data team and our school finance team, along with Ida and Paula and our team, because this is the very detailed information that by the end of this calendar year, we are going to need to display on the website that I just spoke about. So we are wanting to be sure that you folks, when you received an email from Monique about maintenance of equity, we sort of highlighted that website. We also want to be sure that the information is as accurate as possible. So we've done some calculations at the state level, but we also want to confirm that that data is accurate. So we encourage you to take a look at that site, and we'll also be working with you in regards to this more granular detail, because this is detail about each school within the district that needs to maintain equity. So once we dig into maintenance of equity a little bit more, we'll be connecting the dots, and you'll see what type of granular detail is going to be posted on the SEA's website by the end of this calendar year.
So we're going to back up a little bit and explain some of the exemptions, or exceptions is the word that's used in the statute. So there are LEAs that are accepted from the maintenance of equity requirements. And perhaps those districts aren't here today because they already know that and have gone, phew. But here are the possible ways that someone could be accepted. If it's an SAU or LEA that has fewer than 1,000 students, and we know many school districts in Maine do, operates just a single school, like a K-8 school, serves all students within each grade span within a single school, like there's a one primary school, one middle school, one high school, or, and this is where some of you might be here, demonstrates an exceptional or uncontrollable circumstance. And what would that mean? It's going to be in the next slide. Okay, here's some examples. Notice that the federal government gave us some, such as, I want you to know that it's for each claim of an unusual or exceptional or uncontrollable circumstance, it's going to be the U.S. Department of Education that reviews it case by case. But they gave some examples. They're expecting or anticipating very few appeals through this process. But if there was a sudden unpredictable change in student enrollment, that might be uncontrollable on your part. If there is a precipitous decline in the financial resources that your LEA has or SAU has, that could be an example. A one-time exemption for increased fiscal year 2022, which was the last school year budget. So if there was a one-time increase, or if this LEA can certify that it will not implement an aggregate reduction in combined state and local per pupil funding for fiscal year 2022, which was the last school year, and fiscal year 2023, which is where we are now, just beginning. And so if you are an LEA or an SAU that wants to request a waiver because of these unusual and uncontrollable circumstances, or because you are you're going to certify that you're going to be maintaining the funding levels or increasing, there is Appendix B to complete, and that's on our website, and we can make it available again or link it up in these slides so that you can make sure you can find it, to certify that there is not an aggregate reduction in combined state and local per pupil funding for last school year and this school year. Now, these do get sent to the Maine Department of Education. So you would email it either to Monique or Shelley if you're requesting a waiver. And even though you might be sitting here thinking, oh, phew, we have fewer than 1,000 students, we don't have to do this. We are encouraging all school districts to maintain documentation that they were exempted or accepted from maintaining maintenance of equity. And those of you who are needing to document that you are maintaining equity, you also need to obviously maintain documentation. So yeah, good.
Is this me, Shelley? I couldn't remember my slides.
It is.
So I just wanted to take just 1 second and just point out the reason why we're encouraging districts to keep their own documentation is because we only see what gets reported to us. So we're not the one that has the calculations or the actual data for how you're determining if you've met MoEquity or not. The data needed for MoEquity, this is why we also brought in our data and our finance team, because it's state and local funding provided to all schools for school year 2020 and 2021, and then 21-22. The total number of FTEs, again, for the same 2 school years, and then your total enrollment for school year 2020 and 2020, 2021, and 21-22. And it's really important that it has to be the most appropriate available enrollment data for the applicable fiscal school year. And then this could also include prior year enrollment, average year enrollment. The key here is that whatever you use for your school year 2021, you need to use the same data set or the same methodology for school year 21-22. So it has to be the same data. You can't take different data sets for each year. We did, working with our data team, with Ida and Karan, we did revise their MoEquity tool. I know we posted one back in December when Tyler Bacchus was with the department. And when we went back to look at it, we realized that it needed a little bit of updating. So Karan and Ida worked on that. So that is now on our website, and we can provide technical assistance on that if you need it. And that's why also Karan and Ida are here at this for this meeting or technical assistance webinar. So we did determine, based on SAPI data, we determined for the LEAs that were not accepted based on the allowable exceptions, we went ahead and we determined what your high poverty schools were based on the safety data. And I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, but the reason why we are reviewing this with you is because if we really strongly, highly encourage you to look at your data, because if our data does not align with your data, ultimately it is the LEA or SAU that is responsible for determining those high poverty schools. We're just trying to help you out and have one less thing for you to do. And also we have to report out to the U.S. Department of Education which of the high poverty schools are in each of the LEAs, SAUs. So just real quickly, and this is also on question 25 of the MoEquity FAQ sheet. So if we're going too quickly or you are a processor like I am and you want to go back and look actually at it again, those are the references for it. So you're going to need to rank each school economically by percentage of economically disadvantaged. You can do it by your whole district or by grade span. And I'll be fully transparent. Most of the districts, I think all the districts that we calculated for, we did it by the whole district, because it actually worked out better for districts to look at your poverty rate as a whole, as a district, versus doing it in grade span. You would have had more schools identified if you had done grade span. But again, this is up to the district, and the district gets to decide this. We were just trying to help out and do that for you. If an LEA ranks by grade span, an LEA may first select the high poverty schools in each rank order. So if you do it by district, then you may only have 3 schools. But if you do it by grade span, you might have to identify a high school and a middle school and an elementary school, which could actually be 3 schools versus district, which you may only have to identify 2. You're going to divide the number of schools in the LEA by 4 to determine the number of schools in the highest quartile. And if the result is not a whole number, then you're going to add up. So if it's like 2.5, then it goes to 3. And then you're going to identify the highest, based on that, you're going to identify the highest number of LEA schools within that poverty. So if you have 4, how does this work again? I just did the math in my head. So if you have 8 schools and you divide by 4, you need to identify 2 schools that are your highest poverty school. And so that's what we did based on the safety data that you received a letter saying that you had so many schools that needed to meet MoEquity. So again, this is just another chart that you can look at the difference between district-wide and grade span. So if you look at the first chart there, we're doing it by district-wide. So there are 9 schools, and if you divide by 4, you get 2 point something, and so you have to round up. So based on this first example, you would have to identify 3 schools that were your highest poverty. And it's literally, you just look at the economic disadvantage percentage, and then you just rank them by there. So school 1, 2, and 3, you would have to make sure you maintain equity for, and 4 through 9, you would not have to. And as you can see, if you move to the grade span, in this particular situation, you would have to only identify 3 again, because you have an elementary, you have a middle, and you have high school. So those are your 3 grade spans, and then you would rank your elementaries. So what schools 1, 2, 3 are your elementaries. You would rank your middle and your high school. And the interesting thing about this, though, is that because you did it by grade span, like look at the high school. Typically, high school at 40% would probably not be receiving additional monies because it's at 40%, and you have elementary schools that have a little higher percentage. So in this situation, it doesn't necessarily align with how districts typically fund their schools. But again, if we did it we did all the schools by grade span. But if you really feel strongly and you really want to do it by, sorry, just the opposite. We did our schools by district wide. Sorry about that. we ranked all the schools district-wide. But if you are as an LEA or an SAU really want to go back and redo it as grade span, you can do that as well. Just let us know and we will update that information. In the letter, I said if any of this data is not accurate, please let us know and we'll update it. So I think I went over that pretty quickly. But if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we will have time for questions. We just want to get through these real quickly.
Hi, hello. So identifying, I'm getting reverb. I apologize if anybody else is getting reverb. Identifying the funding sources. So essentially, we're looking at current expenditures, and this would be administration, instruction. So this sort of first little bullet here, attendance, health services, operation and maintenance of plant, fixed charges, net expenditures to cover deficits for food service and student body activities. What it doesn't cover are the capital outlays, debt services, federal funds, or other private funds. And this data has to be consistent for the 2 years that you need to maintain equity. Can we go ahead? Okay. So once you've gotten your current expenditure, you will take that total and you will divide it by the number of total pupils in your district. And then for each of the schools, you will do you will do that for each year, 21, school year 21 and 22, and then you will compare the two overall district-wide per pupil costs. Okay, can we switch it? So I really like this chart. This is question 27, and this is the district-wide. And so you're creating your per pupil for the district. You're also creating a school-wide per pupil amount, and that would be the current cost expenditures within the school divided by the school enrollment. And this chart, I think, was really very helpful. And what it says is that if overall, on a district-wide level, from 1 year to the next, you do not have an overall, on average, per pupil decrease. However, when you start looking at your high poverty schools, so school 1 here, there was no reduction, so it had the average. But in school 2 here, there was $50 reduction in per pupil, then you have not maintained equity. So again, so these two schools in red, because of the $50 per pupil reduction, this indicates the maintenance of equity was not maintained. Again, here, for example, 2, where the average, the district average was $50 per pupil reduction. These reductions of 150 and 100 are above that. So these schools, again, would indicate that maintenance of the equity was not maintained. However, you had the average of a $50 reduction and a $50 reduction in this third school, that was fine. And then again, in example 3, where there's an average $100 reduction, each of these schools, was either at the average or below the average. So that was maintenance of equity was maintained. Okay, can we go another chart? So, and this just essentially states that, so that your overall reduction has to be maintained in each of the identified schools. So the example is, if the first year there was a $15,000 per pupil average, and then it went down in 22 to $14,000, the average district decrease was $1,000, and each of your identified high poverty schools for the district, this is again a district-wide approach, would have to be less than or equal to that $1,000 per pupil amount for the given year. And this next text says essentially that if you have no average decrease, any amount in your high poverty schools will mean that you did not maintain equity. Next. Okay. So now here we're doing the grade span. And again, as Monique was saying, this approach, because you're given a lot of room to define your grade spans or what's in a middle school grade span, there's a likelihood that you might have to identify more schools, but it's a similar approach. Essentially, you would be looking at the district-wide current expenditures, creating a district-wide per pupil amount. Then you would be doing a similar math for each of the grade spans, looking at the expenditures within the grade spans, dividing by the number of pupils within those grade spans for each year, FY21 and FY22, to compare them. Next sheet, please. So then you would compare for the elementary schools, 21 to 22 per pupil amounts. For middle schools, the same thing, and then for high schools as you define those grade spans. Next sheet. And then again, if there is a decrease in any of the grade spans, so again, here we have a $1,000 decrease, average decrease. If your identified high poverty grade span school is more than that, has more of a decrease than that $1,000, it means that you did not maintain equity. If on average, again, if there was no per pupil change for your district in the grade spans, but you have in your high poverty schools any kind of decrease, then you have not maintained equity. I think this one's Monique.
So just like with the per pupil expenditures, you also need to do that for your staffing. So it's very similar to what you would do for per pupil, except you're looking at staff instead of looking at just overall amount that was allocated to your schools. So this includes, and I'm sure there's going to be more questions about how do we count staff? It includes all paid staff, both instructional and non-instructional. And this includes all employees, including even those that are hired to do contract work. And it's to perform school level services. Staff who are split their time between one school, you would do a proportional FTE. So if you have a social worker and the social worker works at 3 different schools, then it's going to be a split FTE for each of those schools that you need when you're trying to figure out if they've met MoEquity. You're also really encouraged to use equity in terms of its overall staffing budget. And even though they're looking at the statute pulls out actual number of FTEs, it also is highlighted in the statute that you also want to look at, and also in the guidance, you want to look at the qualifications and level of experience of staff in high poverty schools. Even though that's not as quantifiable, you can meet MoEquity, but if you have all of your inexperienced staff at a school that's high poverty, then they want you to really look at that as well. And they want to make sure the LEA should make sure that you maintain that staffing throughout the entire year. We understand things happen. We know there's a lot of staffing shortages right now, but the intent is for that to stay in effect. That FTE ratio needs to stay in effect for the entire school year. Is this you, Ida, or is this me? I can't remember. I can do it. So again, you want to, just like you did with the per pupil, you want to make sure that you're staffing equity on district-wide basis. So you're going to take the total number of FTEs provided to all schools for 2020 and 2021 and divide by the LEA's total enrollment for 2020-21. Then you're going to divide that number of FTEs by provided to all the schools in school-wide 22 by the LEA's total enrollment for 21-22. And then you're going to compare them. And just like you did with the per pupil, you're going to do that with the total number of FTEs provided to all schools, and then total number of FTEs provided to all schools in 20. So you got to figure out if there was an aggregate reduction, then that kind of goes into the next slide, which talks about, again, if you had a reduction in FTEs at the district level, then it needs to be proportionate to the reduction in FTEs at those high poverty schools as well. And I think the next slide will probably show that. Actually, it just talks, yeah. So if there's an overall decrease in per pupil FTEs for all schools, then the LEA has to make sure that it doesn't reduce just at a disaggregate rate. It has to be a proportional rate. So if you reduced 0.5, if there was a reduction of overall like 0.5, for example, is if an LEA provided on average a 0.09 FTE per pupil to schools, then you have to make sure that those high poverty schools were reduced at the same rate. They can't have been reduced at a higher rate than what the decrease was for the district as a whole. And if there's no decrease for FTEs for all schools, then an LEA can't reduce a per pupil high poverty schools. So for example, you did the calculations and there was no reduction at all for the district, but you look at your high poverty schools and they actually had a reduction in FTEs, then you haven't met MoEquity and you'll have to do some working around with that. Again, just like before, you can do it by grade span. And you can see how if you do it grade span, then you have to do this calculation for each of your grade spans that you've identified. Here on this chart, it's elementary, then middle and high school, and you do the same calculation that you would do for district-wide. And again, the same with what you did with district, you would have to do for each of the grade spans and determine that at each grade span, those schools that were identified as highest poverty for each of those grade spans, if you had an overall decrease for FTEs for all schools, you have to make sure that those identified highest poverty schools in each of the grade spans did not have a reduction in their FTEs that was not proportional to the reduction for the overall district. And again, if there was no decrease for the whole district for FTEs, you can't have had a decrease for those high poverty schools identified at each grade span. And this is, yeah, I think this is where Karan or Ida are going to come in.
So we know that there's been some questions in the chat box that we're tending to as well. So if you have any follow-up, Ida responded to the question in regards to if there was an overall increase in the per pupil amounts from FY22 to FY21 or FY19, how does that affect? And essentially there is no reduction. So just as long as there is also no reduction anywhere else, that indicates that you are maintaining equity for your schools. So Ida responded, and then I also followed up with the references directly from the FAQ in case you want to go back to that document to be sure that you have an area where you can connect it to statute and to the FAQ. We wanted to be sure we had that. So now, as Monique mentioned, there's this tool that Karan and Ida and Paula put together. And it is available on our website. It is a tool that was modified from our old colleague, Tyler Backus. And Karan, do you want to walk through the tool? Do you want me to open it up on my screen?
Yeah, that'll be helpful.
Okay, give me just a moment.
Sure.
I'm going to stop sharing and I'll open that up for you folks. As I mentioned, that is directly on our website, and I'll put our website link so that you have access to it once I open up the file. It is an Excel spreadsheet, so it will download. It won't open up in a new browser. So if you don't notice that it's coming at the bottom, you'll see it open up. And then I will share my screen and I'll let Karan walk through the tool.
Awesome. Thank you, Shelley. Shelley, can you go to year 2 staff data? We'll start from there. We'll start from all the input points, and then we'll go to the final page where we are looking for the output. Okay, so on this particular tab, you'll have to pull in information for staff data, and we have provided the source where you will pull in this data from on this sheet. We have also provided what kind of instruction you'll need to segregate the staff into instructional and non-instructional, and how we were thinking it would go, but it's on your discretion on how you will segregate it based on this particular instruction. So the only pieces you need for staff data is their profile ID, their organization ID. Again, all this information you can get from the staff source that I've provided. You'll need there's a school name, instructional status, which you will be providing based on the information, again, in that second tab. And you'll need their FTEs and salaries. Moving on to our, you'll have to do this again for year 1 and year 2. So year 1 will be your most recent year, and year 2 will be your previous year. Sorry, year 2 will be the most recent year, and year 1 will be your previous year. So that's how it goes. And you have to do this for 2 years. Again, when you go to, Shelley, can you go to year 2 expenditures or year 1 expenditures, either one of those spreadsheets? So this is where you will enter your expenditure data, and this is all based on budget. So pertaining to the question that was asked in the chat earlier, whether these calculations are based on budget or actual, these are based on budgets, and has been mentioned in the spreadsheet as well, just so that it provides some additional clarifications. Again, on the information of where to pull this data from, I've provided all this information in these tabs as well. We have excluded cost centers 400 to 499 that are adult or continuous education, and we've also excluded all other educational organizations, which are cost centers 500 to 590. All your calculations for your budget, when you go on to looking at your output, your your system-wide counts and your cost centers 900, 950, and 990, those will already be accounted automatically in the calculations. You don't have to enter them separately. So all your larger grade spans will be accounted for. If we move on to a quick next spreadsheet, quick next tab, which is cost centers and students. So here is where you will add information about your student counts for each of these grade schools, their grade span information and school IDs. This sheet will do the calculation for you. It will calculate your disadvantage percentage as well as rank your school at a district-wide according to your district-wide information and grade span information based on the grade span categories that you've provided in this column N. All this information is then used in our final output, which is for your year-to-year comparison. We can move on to year 1 or year 2 budgetary factors. So this is where all your expenditure data that you've entered in the year 1 and year 2 budget expenditure tabs get passed in and get segregated. So we have whatever cost centers you've entered in your budget are accurately segregated here. And actually, if you can scroll to the right, it will show you that we've accounted for cost centers 900, 950, and 990 at the very end. So these are already accounted for in the calculations. You don't have to re-enter them again. And everything in this particular tab is calculated. So once you have entered the data using those first 5 tabs, which is year 1 expenditure, year 2 expenditure, year 1 staff, year 2 staff, and cost centers, everything else will be calculated by the spreadsheet. Again, all the information that you need for pulling out this data and exclusions are mentioned on those tabs. So as to provide some additional clarification and easier reference for you guys. Once we have calculated our budget or we have refactored our budget values, we will go on and use these values in our year-to-year comparison, which is the next tab. And this is where you'll see our final output. So you'll see the school level information. You'll see total attending counts for this latest year. You'll also see percentage economically disadvantaged. You'll see the ranking that was displayed on the cost center spreadsheet, which has been pulled to this particular tab. And we then use it for calculating our MoEquity, which is at per pupil spending, and per pupil staff FTE, which is further to the right of the spreadsheet. Again, information is pretty much standard over here. You don't have to enter anything in this particular tab. This is mostly just the output, and whatever information you've entered in the other five spreadsheets, you will see it over here being calculated. And as I mentioned, calculations for system-wide building and system-wide pupils are also included here. So elementary, secondary, and system-wide on rows 45 through 47, those will be also calculated automatically. And I went too fast through this. I understand that, but if you guys have any questions, we are here to help you.
So I think now is a very good time to open up the floor. The last few slides of our PowerPoint are really related to some resources as well as our contact information, and we'll be sure to share those with you. But we want to be sure that we maintain some time and some space for any of your questions. So I have both the slideshow and a couple of the websites that we shared with you open. I'm going to stop sharing my screen until we have a question that might need some additional materials to be shown, because we want to be sure that we can answer anything that you may have, even a question that you popped in the chat box that you just want to have us orally reference as well. So the due date, great question. In the FAQ, we have all scoured from head to toe, read multiple times. There is no per se due date. I know that you folks, some of you folks may have received an adjustment to your EPS funding in June of 2022. Again, referring back to the fact that the SEA must maintain equity as well as the LEA. So we made an adjustment in June of 22 to be sure that the SEA was maintaining equity for FY22. I think, you want to think about when is an opportune time within your district to be able to make adjustments to be sure that you are maintaining equity. That may not be June of 2022 for FY22. So thinking ahead potentially would be helpful and beneficial for districts as they're engaging in conversations about budget decisions. I know that we wanted to make this information available, which we made maintenance of equity available in March because we wanted to be sure that while you were engaging in conversations for FY23, you had maintenance of equity kind of top of mind. Again, we encourage you folks to do calculations because you're required to if you are a district that must maintain equity. We're encouraging you to do those as early as possible so that changes can be made to be able to maintain equity. I know there was a question in the chat box, which I'm going to connect to the due date question, but essentially it says, what happens if we are not maintaining equity? So essentially, we as a department are going to work with you. We're going to potentially think about some changes, some possible corrective actions. We're also going to pull in our U.S. Department of Education program officer because this is a component that is going back to the U.S. Department of Education. Our program officer asks us, July 9th, where is the information that you posted on your website? They've also asked us for updated spreadsheets. They've asked us how we're confirming that our LEAs are maintaining equity. So anybody who completed the performance report, if that was one of the tasks that you engage in, you noticed that there was an entire page related to maintenance of equity and certifying that you as a district were aware of it, you were maintaining it, and you knew that this was a requirement when you are receiving these federal emergency relief funds, particularly ARP. So there is no prescribed due date, but really thinking about how in your local context, when is the best time to make adjustments to confirm that you're maintaining equity. So once you've completed the spreadsheet, which is not a requirement, it is a tool that we developed as a team to support our districts. So that spreadsheet that Karan spoke about was not developed as a requirement to submit to the Maine Department of Education, but rather as a tool to support you folks in confirming that you can maintain equity within your district. So the ways in which we as a team, there are going to be some certain requirements that will come to fruition here in the next couple months, knowing that we need to provide some more granular detail on our website by the end of the calendar year. So the first check that we did was in the application itself. So the ARP application talked about maintenance of equity. In our performance report, there also was a certification as well as some check boxes for any district that was accepted from maintaining equity. So those are two checks that have already transpired in our work and within our office. We do know that eventually we're going to need to do one more check to be sure that the granular data that we have in-house is also the data that you folks have at the local level. And we will need to be able to do that before December 31st of 2022, so the end of this calendar year. So you will likely have an email from us that says, this is what we see, this is what we can create based on the data that we have here in-house. Is this aligned and accurate with the information you have? If you've selected other ways in which to calculate, for example, our assumption is many of our districts are going to district-wide rank, but if you've selected to grade span, you'll need to communicate that to us. And we will send out an email to the districts that are not accepted for maintaining equity in about the next month or so. We really want you folks to be able to engage in the start of the school year and get your footing before we start asking for additional requirements. And essentially piggybacking off a similar question, you want to maintain the documentation. So when an audit comes down the pike and they say, Office of Federal Emergency Relief Programs, how can you confirm that I'll use my home district as an example. RSU 16 is maintaining equity. We can say we've checked on the application, we've checked on the performance report. This is the supports that we've provided to the district. And this is also the information that we correlated with the district before posting on our website. And then they say, okay, what type of documentation that do you have from the district? That documentation may have been maintained for a monitoring visit or for a desk audit, and we could pull that. But if you happen to be a district that did not participate in a monitoring or a desk audit, we may not have that information. And if an auditor picks another local district down the road from me, RSU 17, and we don't have that information, then we would need to reach out to RSU 17 and say, what type of documentation do you have that we can pass along to the state controller's office or to the inspector general's office or any one of our auditing entities, the U.S. Department of Education. So in regards to one of the questions in the chat box, if the spreadsheet is not a required item, can maintenance of equity be determined in other means? If you are a district that's sort of engaging in that conversation, I would strongly encourage you go back to the FAQ and you follow the FAQ and you read it, because if you've determined equity outside of the parameters of the statute, you are compromising your district in regards to claiming or maintaining equity for your schools within your district. So again, like I said, the tool, the Excel spreadsheet is not a requirement, but we've developed that tool based on the information provided in the FAQ and the statute of maintenance of equity. I don't know if any of my colleagues want to add to any of the responses that I've provided or any additional information.
I just wanted to add that I know this is a brand new requirement and it can be a little bit hard to wrap your head around, but I wanted to really, I think Shelley mentioned it at the beginning, but I wanted to just kind of stress it again that the SEA has its own requirements and then the LEAs, SAUs have this requirement. So the SEA has already met the MoEquity requirement. That's so now this is the responsibility of the SAU, the school district. And so it sounds like we're kind of like putting a lot of pressure on you, but it really is the responsibility of the LEA. But we are here to help and support, and that tool, that Excel doc or Excel spreadsheet really is a tool for you. It's not required because again, it's the LEA's responsibility to maintain MoEquity. We're just trying to give you another tool to help with that. But again, like Shelley said, go back to the FAQ. If you feel like that tool is not going to be beneficial for you, go back and read that, because that would help you determine if you are meeting MoEquity for those high poverty schools.
We have a few more minutes, so our team will stay on for any additional questions. Otherwise, reach out to us if there's anything that we can do. Our team is here to support you folks. As I mentioned, you likely will receive an email in the next month or so following up on maintenance of equity information, just to be sure that the information that we post on December is correlated with you folks at the local level. So we're here to help. Reach out. We are more than willing to make a one-on-one opportunity to engage in conversation if you really want to sort of roll up your sleeves and dig in, because you've used the tool, you've reviewed the FAQ, and you find yourselves in maybe a challenging situation and you just want to discuss a little bit more. We're here to engage in that dialogue as well. Thank you, everyone. We hope that you're having a wonderful beginning of the school year. And like I said, our team will stay on for the next 5 or 6 minutes. If there's anyone who would like to pose an individual question, we will be here.
Shelley, I have an individual question, if you don't mind. Is there a way we could set up a meeting to go over that tool with I have a brand new business manager. So I was overwhelmed looking at that tool. I imagine he would be even more overwhelmed looking at that tool. I'd like to set up an opportunity just to do a meeting with he and maybe somebody from your team, and then myself, and just take a close look at where do we go to access the information, and just like slow step by step.
So we can look at our calendars. I think it's critical to have as many of us as possible on the line with you folks, because we all come to the world with different perspectives. So, but critically for that one-on-one conversation, we would need Ida and Karan and Monique in particular, because of their connection to this work. So let us take a look. We can send you a few dates for next week and go from there. How does that sound?
That sounds great. Thank you. I
Perfect.
really appreciate that.